Okay, we're going to have a look at section 82 today, which is a little bit shorter than section 81, so that's, I'm sure you'll think, a positive. In terms of context, Cicero has just accused Antony of not knowing what he's doing and of not knowing what powers he has as both an augur and as a consul, and has finished the last section by saying nec scit quod augurem nec facit quod pudentem decet. He does not know what an augur ought to know, and he does not do what a modest man should do. So that's where he's picking up from. He changes tack just a little bit here, and he starts off with itaque ex illo die recorda mini eius usque ad idus martias consulatum. Itaque, I'm sure, is fine, and so ex illo die, from that day. That day that she's referring to is the 1st of January 44, so he's talking about his consulship, Antony's consulship, that is. So he says, and so from that day, recorda mini. Recordor is a deponent verb, to call to mind, to recollect, to remember, so it's not passive. So we call to mind, therefore, from that day. The object of this is actually the consulatum right at the very end, the consulship, which is modified by the eius further forward. So the consulship of him, so his consulship. He's not talking directly to Antony now. He's addressing the senators, and with the we form is including them in with him. So we recall, therefore, from that day his consulship, usque ad idus martias. Usque is a handy little sort of adverb right up to idus martias, the Ides of March. Obviously, the relevance of the Ides of March is that the Ides of March 44 is the day of Caesar's death, and the day when everything changed for the Republic, but for Antony's situation as well. So we're going to look at the situation from the 1st of January up to the day of Caesar's death and examine how that turned out for Antony. He starts off by saying, quis umquam ad paritor tam humilis tam abiectus. Quis, again, I'm sure you're fine with. Who, umquam, ever. There's no verb here, so you're going to need to imply one, probably just the verb to be, was, whoever was, ad paritor, a public servant, a lictor. So whoever was, or if you wanted to, which is something that Cicero has done a few times in this selection, say something like what lictor was. That might be a better way of dealing with this. So what lictor was ever tam humilis. Humilis is obviously to do with the ground, so tam humilis, so low, so humble. So what lictor was ever so humble? And then the same sort of idea again, tam abiectus. Abiectus comes from iachio, to throw something. So abiectus would mean to sort of cast aside. So what lictor was ever so humble, so low, so sort of downcast is the sense of that. So what lictor was ever so low, so downcast? And he explains himself a little bit. Nihil ipse poterat. Ipse refers to Antony, so he himself, poterat, was able. You need to again imply a verb here. So was able to do, or you could take poterat, was capable of, if you wish to. So he himself was capable of nihil, of nothing. Omnia rogabat, again still referring to Antony, he asked for omnia, everything, neuter plural in the accusative. What he's drawing attention to here is that even though Caesar and Antony are both consuls, and in theory both have the same powers, Antony is not on the same level as Caesar, and that's clear to anybody really who had a pair of eyes. So he can call himself a consul, but he's not one. There is a slight irony in this, in that this nihil ipse poterat, which he's talking about, the previous section, he's just talked about his capability to void Dolabella's election. So he clearly was capable of some things. And in actual fact, the OCR commentary on this suggests that this is a highly ironic statement. I'm not sure that I agree, I think what actually is happening is that it suits Cicero's purpose to paint Antony as a man who has status but no real power at this point. So he's going to move on and make him look like a kind of lapdog for Caesar, a man who's following him around, like he's lost. And so I think this is the beginning of that. I don't think there's any irony here. I think he's just changed his argument, conveniently forgetting what he's just been talking about in terms of Dolabella's election. So he himself was capable of nothing. Omnia rogabat. He sought everything. He asked for everything. Caput in aversam lecticam inserens beneficia quae venderet a collega petebat. There's this lovely comic image of him here. Caput, so it's still referring to Antony, caput his head inserens. So inserting his head in aversam lecticam, in the back of a litter. It will become clear in a moment that this is Caesar's litter. So he is like some sort of cartoon here, following Caesar around and sticking his head in the back of Caesar's litter. A litter, if you don't know, is a kind of portable couch which was used as a means of transport for wealthy men around the city, and often they had curtains bounding them, so he could literally stick his head in the back to get Caesar's attention if he wanted to. So inserting his head into the back of the litter, and then the main verb again is right at the very end, not unusual, petebat. He would seek. I like the use of would here for the imperfect. It suggests a sort of a repetitive action, and I think that's useful here. So he would seek, and then the object of that is beneficia over at the front of the line. So he would seek kindnesses, favours, benefits, and he would seek them a collega, from his colleague. Caesar's not named directly, but that's clearly who it means. Caesar is the colleague in office here. And the favours are described as, using this relative clause, quae venderet. They are favours, quae venderet, which he might sell or to sell. Again, this is a theme which comes up a few times, primarily in the later sections actually of this work, but the idea that Antony is very avaricious and will use his political power to make money is a common theme for Cicero. So he's making just a minor side gesture to that here, but he will build on that argument much later on. So sticking his head into the back of the litter, he would seek kindnesses from his colleague which he could sell. And then suddenly an exclamation, ecce, behold, look, Dolabellae comitiorum dies. Dies is the subject here. The day of Dolabella's. The comitiorum, as we mentioned before, is an assembly, but it might be easier just to translate it as an election here, even though it's in the plural. Just treat it as singular. Look, the day of Dolabella's election. Two things really to note here. There's no verb. So you might want to put one in. Look, the day of Dolabella's election arrives. That's a possibility. You can leave it without one if you want to. The other thing is, of course, that it's Dolabella's election in the sense that probably no one else is standing. So that possessive for him really is quite meaningful. It might again be a little side note from Cicero. Of course, it's Dolabella's election. Can't be anybody else's because Caesar has rigged it in this way. So rapid transformation, change of scene. Suddenly we're at Dolabella's election. And then he gives a lot of detail really about the way in which the election works. We don't know precisely how these things happened, but we do have some form, some sort of understanding of the system. So basically the voting populace would be broken down into centuries. I think there would be 100 of them that aren't, and each of those centuries would cast their vote for the magistrate that they wanted to be elected, or for the person they wanted to be elected as magistrate. And after each of those votes by the centuries, the result of that century vote would then be announced. So we're going to have multiple blocks of voters going up and voting. They took place. The votes were ordered by status and rank. So the more upper class, wealthy citizens would vote first, and then you would get equestrian votes. So the sort of, for want to a better way of phrasing it, Roman middle class, and then the others would vote after that. The first centuries, and this is what Cicero is referring to here, would pull lots to see who actually went first. So the higher class voters would take lots and say, to see who went first. So sortitio, sortitio is just the casting of lots, the drawing of lots, and then praerogatio, the casting of lots of the it's a technical term known as a prerogative century, but it just means the tribe that votes first. So, look, the day of Doliber's election, the casting of lots for the tribe voting first, and then just a single verb on its own, quiescit. He is quiet. He refers to Antony. Why is he making such a big thing about this? Well, in the previous section, in section 81, he talked about the way in which an augur could obstruct some sort of public event. And he said very clearly, you can't wait until it's over, basically. You can't get to the end and then say, okay, that's all void. You have to do it at an earlier point than that. So what he's doing is listing off each of the events which will happen in the election, and then making very clear that Antony did nothing. So the drawing of lots for the first voting century, quiescit, he is quiet. Single verb again, he's keeping the action sort of ticking along, as active as an election can be. Renuntiatur, it is announced, i.e. the result is announced. One more verb again, just another verb, tacet. He is quiet. So passive verb in the middle, referring to the result, but the other two, quiescit and tacet, are referring to Antony. And then you get down to the voting, prima classis vocatur, the first class, so these are the upper class votes. The first class, vocatur, passive verb again, is called. Again, very quickly, another verb straight after, renuntiatur. It is announced. So, as I say, after each set of votes, the winning candidate will be announced. It's one of those things which actually makes Roman politics suddenly seem a lot less democratic than it might first appear. Because of course, once you start announcing votes halfway through a process, it means that it's undoubtedly going to affect the way that people who vote afterwards choose to cast their vote. So prima classis vocatur, the first class is called renuntiatur, it is announced. Deinde, ita ut ad solet suffragia. Deinde, obviously just then, and suffragia. Suffragia is the vote of the equestrians. So then, the equestrian vote, the suffragia. And the section in the middle, ita ut ad solet, is just a little aside from Cicero. Sort of as is so accustomed, so as is the way. As is the norm, something like that. Then, as is usual, suffragia, the vote of the equestrians. Tum secunda classis vocatur. Tum, then, secunda classis, the second class of voters understood, vocatur is called. So this is anybody who's not an equestrian. Quae omnia sunt citius facta, quam dixi. Quae, the connecting relatives, which things, quae omnia, all of which things, in the neuter, all of which things sunt facta, were done citius, more quickly, quam dixi, than I said, or than I have said, than I have relayed at this point. This, I think, is possibly the most difficult bit of this section, because what he's doing here is not entirely clear, and there are a number of theories about what he might be trying to do. The most plausible of those is to emphasise that actually the process of voting does take a long time. This is an enormously hyperbolic, maybe you might consider it a slightly sarcastic statement. Cicero's relayed it in a couple of lines. The votes would take a while to go through. But he says instead, all of these things were done more quickly than I've said. And in doing so, people will be going in the audience, well, of course they weren't, but in making them think like that, he draws attention to the fact that Antony has sat and sat and sat and sat without actually doing anything. And it's only at the end of the process that he will draw attention to his so-called bad omens, his bad signs. I hope that's useful. Let me know, as usual, if there are any problems. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.